So, platform fighters are some of my favorite games, and Warner Brothers has one of my favorite libraries of characters. Needless to say, I am very excited for Multiversus. I could talk about my wish list for the game, but that would just amount to me rambling about various random characters for hours, and I don't see much value in that. Right now, I'd rather wait and see what the devs already have in store before I start filing a bunch of requests. However, I do want to talk about my single most wanted character. The Vigilante, the Icon, the best friend of a RoboCop, the man called Sting. The reason why isn't because of his wrestling repertoire per se. Honestly, there are plenty of other wrestlers that could probably translate to a platform fighter better. However, I consider Sting a must-have simply because of what he represents to Warner Brothers. Multiversus is a celebration of all the characters and stories that Warner Brothers have brought into the world, and I honestly think that Sting represents an important part of that history and deserves to stand alongside the rest of its cast. Our story begins with one of the most important men in Warner Brothers history, Ted Turner. Turner was responsible for bringing together the libraries of Hanna-Barbera and the animation back catalog of MGM, which he used to build the foundation of Cartoon Network. So that's half of the confirmed roster for Multiversus right there, and this was all before his merger deal with Time Warner. Another big business venture of Turner's was buying the wrestling company Jim Crockett Promotions and evolving it into World Championship Wrestling, or WCW. For years, WCW was easily one of the biggest wrestling companies in the United States, its only real competition being the WWE. Throughout its history, one of the most prominent heroes of WCW was Sting. Initially, he was a charming and cheerful surfer dude who boldly stood against devious villains like the Four Horsemen. When the fearsome New World Order rose to prominence and threatened to rebuild the WCW in their image, Sting became a dark vigilante to face his greatest threat. Descending from the rafters with a black baseball bat in hand, Sting was the spirit of WCW made manifest, and the strongest opposition for everything the NWO tried to achieve. Unfortunately, the story of WCW would not end with Sting or the NWO, but with AOL. In 2001, AOL merged with Time Warner, and the bigwigs at AOL insisted on shutting the door on WCW. While WCW had a lot going against it at this point in time, what truly put the company out of commission was the petty pride of a few rich men. Highbrow businessmen had often looked down on pro wrestling as lesser entertainment that reflected badly on them for producing it. This wasn't the first time WCW had faced this kind of scrutiny from on high, but Ted Turner had always protected them, believing that wrestling was capable of much more than its detractors believed. He genuinely respected the art of wrestling and cherished having it as a part of his company. Sadly, after the merger with AOL, he no longer had a position where he could stand up for WCW. On March 26, 2001, WCW would air its final episode, with the main event being Sting versus the leader of the Four Horsemen, Ric Flair, two of the most important competitors in WCW's history, bidding it a fond farewell before it would be bought by its arch-rival, WWE. In the following years, many of the stars of WCW would jump to the WWE, who now stood as the de facto monopoly of American wrestling. One who resisted the siren song of the mighty WWE was Sting, who instead took his talents to the unfortunately named TNA Impact. Despite the name, TNA was not, in fact, a porn company, but a then brand new wrestling promotion seeking to fill the void created by the fall of WCW. While the company would have as much of a questionable history as you'd expect from one with a name that bad, Sting gave them everything he had for the next 11 years of his life in the hopes that they could build themselves into something that could truly challenge WWE. WCW may have been dead, but Sting still carried their spirit. In 2014, at the age of 55, Sting finally answered the siren song and signed with WWE. This would prove to be a grave mistake. Sting would only have 3 matches with WWE. The final one would end with Sting seriously injured, his in-ring career seemingly at an end. However, even this would not be the end of Sting's story. Just 1 year ago, Sting would make his return in the newest competitor to stand against the dominance of WWE. AEW is the fiercest competition that WWE has faced since WCW, and it appropriately airs on TBS and TNT. The first T in both of their names stands for the man that built both networks, none other than Ted Turner. The spirit of WCW proving to still be very much alive and well. Warner Brothers doesn't own AEW, but the connections are countless. Also, following the recent merger of AEW and the 17-year-old wrestling promotion Ring of Honor, they are easily one of the most valuable wrestling companies in the country, with seemingly every streaming service salivating at the opportunity to buy out WWE right now, whose library has already proven strong enough to support a streaming service entirely on its own. Warner Brothers would be insane to let AEW slip through their fingers in this day and age. Now, I do want to acknowledge that featuring a real person in a live service game like this can be risky. For one, there's always the chance that the celebrity in question could end up signing a contract with some competing company that can force you to stop using them in the game. There's also the possibility that they could get caught up in some controversy or even criminal act that makes it so nobody wants them in the game anymore. You can never guarantee that won't happen with someone. Life is just unpredictable in many ways. That said, I do think that Sting is at least one of the least risky options out there. I really doubt he's ever going to sign with WWE again, and there's nowhere else that can really tempt him away from AEW. He also has one of the cleanest records in wrestling. Again, you can never truly know what skeletons someone could have in their closet, or what they could potentially do in the future. But, for what it's worth, I do believe that Sting can be trusted not to get wrapped up in anything like that. Ultimately, I honestly think that AEW deserves a place in Multiversus, and that Sting should absolutely be the first person to represent it. And the second should be Taz, because seeing him suplex Taz from the Looney Tunes would be hilarious, and not at all because I'm terrified that his very handsome son would kill me if I didn't say that. Honestly, it would be an honor. Hook, if you're seeing this and ever want to rip my head off, my address is 69...